Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. Have you guys heard of Beam? I have been absolutely loving their products lately. Beam is a CBD company that's making waves in the running world by offering products that combine THC-free CBD with other high-quality ingredients. It was founded by two ex-professional athletes with the idea that everyone should have the chance to experience what better feels like. Whether you're sore or stressed, Beam is key for recovery and self-care. Try it for yourself with 15% off using the code FTLR from beamtlc.com. I recommend Beam Dream Powder or the Focus Capsules. Welcome back. I have Karis Jochen joining me on the podcast today. Karis, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
For sure. So we are trying video. So I get to see somebody's face during a podcast for the first time in a long time. So thanks for humoring me with this. But before we dive too far into it, the first question is, who is Karis?
I love this question. So professionally, I am a runner and graduate student getting my master's in data analytics. And in the soul, I am a lifelong learner and pursuer of all passions.
I love that. In the soul, not just like in life. So we went on a walk a couple weeks ago at 6 a.m. and you were asking me these like deep questions about life and what are we here for and who am I and all this stuff. And it got my wheels turning on having you on this podcast and, doing it at a time that was, the sun was up and we've both had at least 1 to 3 cups of coffee. So here we are.
Yeah, that was so good. I love all sunset and sunrise conversations.
Yes, it was lovely. The coffee was great too. So given that this is a running podcast initially, maybe let's set the stage there and then we'll dive into more of the life side of things. So do you remember your first run?
I do. The first memory of running was probably in first grade whenever we had to run a mile time trial for those presidential fitness tests. I remember I beat everyone except for 2 boys, but I hated running. It was just one of those, let's just get it over with as soon as possible. I'm a competitive person, so I'm going to give it my all. I don't like doing it, but let's just get it over with kind of thing.
And how did it evolve from those first few runs to where you are today, running at the level you're at or having run at the level you're at and where you're hoping to go with it?
Yeah, so I continued running through middle school and my younger years as a way to stay conditioned for soccer. I was a competitive soccer player growing up and a center mid. So running was one of my primary skills that I needed as a center mid on the soccer field. And so that was what I did during the fall of middle school and everything growing up. And then my sophomore year of high school, I was still running cross country because, again, staying conditioned for soccer. And I suddenly got kind of out of nowhere 5th in the state of Texas and qualified for NXN as an individual. And that was kind of when the bug bit me. The running, you have to run a certain number of miles before you fully experience the high. And that was kind of the point where I was starting to get emotionally addicted. I was started to see success. And then at the same time, I had stopped growing. And so I was getting pushed around on the soccer field. And so wasn't as competitive there, was seeing success in running. And the more you do it, the more I was learning about myself outside of running and just loving the entire process and just continued pursuing it because that seemed to be the thing in life that was setting my soul on fire.
I love that. And it's less about the tangible aspect and more about the process. And I've reflected on this component of like elite running or successful running, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 times now on this podcast. And I started asking questions about success and like, what does success mean to you? And fast forward 5 to 10 years. And anyone who's ever achieved anything that I've asked this question to, maybe not anyone, 90% of the people that I've asked this question to have about what is success or what would you be proud of in 5 to 10 years, 90% of them have not given me a tangible answer. It's I would be proud of getting better or showing up every day or growing a team or like all of these things that you can't put metrics around, which for you as a data analyst and data scientist is where it's all metrics based, right? But this is process. And so I'm wondering where the switch came for you, or was there ever a switch? Was it always this way? Because I think that that's a piece that a lot of amateurs in particular miss, and definitely some pros as well. But I think that there's a lot to be learned from getting to that place.
Yeah. Wow. Such a good question. I've never been asked that before of like when the switch was, but, and I don't think I've ever really thought about when the switch was myself, but whenever you ask me that, I know the answer right away. And it was when I graduated college and not, and the reason being because I was very disappointed with my collegiate career. The last 2 years of college, I was plagued with chronic hamstring tendinopathy and ran probably in a 24-month period, probably ran 10 of those months, just on and off. Couldn't get over this hamstring tendinopathy. And I graduated PRing in the 10K despite having so much pain in my high hamstring, and then decided I'm not going to run again until it's pain free. And that decision was probably kind of whenever I realized that it had to be process oriented. It could not be goal oriented because I had graduated college having not accomplished close to any of the goals that I had set myself whenever entering college. And I had to think back on my collegiate career and ask myself, was it worth it? Was it worth how much emotional and physical time I had put into it? Was it worth the literal pain that I had put my body through to the point where I had trouble sitting comfortably? Was it all worth it for pursuit of something that never even happened? And as disappointed as I was with my collegiate career, my answer was yes. It was all worth it because even though I wasn't successful, I was pursuing something with my whole heart. And even though I can look back at my collegiate career and count and point out so many things that I wish I had done differently, I don't lament past Karis for those decisions because at the time she was doing the best that she could with the information she had. And I think that that's all we can do. And all of those mistakes or things that I can point to in my past I wish I had done differently, I use them as lessons to go forward. And maybe they'll work out in some way to be like a tangible goal that I've set out to myself. But if I'm pursuing something and learning along the way and becoming a better version of myself as a runner and more importantly as a person, then I think that that's all that we can do in life. And that's what we're called to do and share with each other.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's when you push the tangible aspect aside and focus on how you framed it there, like the tangible results come. And if they don't, they don't. But if they do, they do. And it's not like, I think it was Scott Fauble who wrote a piece about not sitting in your successes. Like, if you don't define yourself by your failures, why would you define yourself by your successes? You probably have more failures than successes. So why would you define yourself by your successes? And I loved this point, and he's someone who like clearly loves the process, and he documents it through storytelling with Naz Elite and all of this. And yeah, he'll have some great days, and most of the rest of the days will be trash. But that doesn't really matter. Those are just data points, and it just informs how you manipulate the process. And I find that approach admirable and hard to get to, but I think it's how you improve tangibly, which then helps you enjoy it more.
Yeah, I agree. Because whenever you take that mindset, whenever you line up to any starting line, and that's in the running sphere, but starting line of any big goal that you set out for yourself, if you enjoy the process to getting there, then you line up to that starting line already a winner. And I fully believe that gives you the freedom to self actualize what you're capable, because fear is what keeps us from reaching our potential. And the ultimate race I can think of for anyone is the person who lines up just without fear, and totally ready to make a fool out of themselves, but enjoy finding out and being curious about the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So before my last marathon, I was talking with Shalane about racing, and she said, enjoy it. Race day is when I feel most alive, with all the uncertainty and the unknown, and like go out and find out what you're made of. And I stood on that start line. It's 55 degrees, raining, with a smile on my face, like, I'm going to have a day, and let's see what happens. And several thousand miles went into like delivering me to that start line in the headspace that I was at. And obviously I wanted to see a 2 on the clock at the end of the 26.2 miles, but it didn't matter. It was like you said, like I got to that start line happy and ready to like, what's going to happen next? And that's where the magic happens. You don't get that, but when it happens, like that's why we do it, right? When you're like so present that anything is success.
Yeah, I feel like that's so great. I feel like my favorite part of racing for both myself and as a spectator is I want to see the results, but I wish a part of track and field and road racing and trail racing, just the running, I wish there was a way that we would all capture the stories behind the races, which is one of the things that I think you're doing with your podcast and the podcast boom in general, which is so fantastic, is those race results, whether they're epic failures or epic successes, are just moments in time. But I want to know the story behind that person, like what got them to that starting line, because chances are that there's so much that no one knows went into that. And one of my favorite quotes, I'm going to misquote it. I wish I had it in front of me, but it's something about don't like show me someone's story, and you'll show me someone that I love. Dang, I'm messing that up. But it was the thought being like, there isn't someone in this world who once you hear their story, you won't fall in love with, because you never know what's actually behind a person.
Yeah, totally. And I think that like I've had conversations on this podcast where I've literally started with like, oh, you've done some cool stuff in your career. Like, I don't want to talk about any of it. I want to talk about what's next. Like I said that to Kara Goucher when we sat in Boulder a couple of years ago, and I said, look, you're an Olympian. You've represented the country at the highest level. Like, not interested. Let's talk about the future and why you're doing this and what's like, tell me your story. And I think that there's so much that's lost in just looking at the numbers. And I'm never interested in like, oh yeah, I nailed this 20 by 400 workout and it was great. And it helped me, increase my aerobic threshold by blah, blah, blah. I currently train effort based, and it's a total removal of numbers as the driving metric. But we both work in a job where numbers are the driving metric, whether it's blood work or whether it's data or whether it's whatever it is. So I think it's like a little respite, and also like a chance to let the qualitative aspect tell the story. David, my coach, was watching the splits in that race, and he saw them going, flatlining basically, and then slowing down and slowing down and slowing down. And I hit this point at like mile 20 or 21, or it was 20, 22. And I was like, nope, this day's not over yet. And then the pace picked right back up. And so David's watching at home, like watching the splits go from like 640s, 640, 640, 640, 640, 650, 7, 710, and then back to 7, and then back below 7. And he's like, oh my God, I can't wait to hear the story behind this. Like, the numbers are telling, like in that case, the numbers were telling the story, but the story was much more interesting than that. So, again, I've told this story on the podcast, I don't know, 30 times now. So I'm going to have to run another race to get another and better story. But, so it goes in 2021. I'll continue to reflect on a race from 2 years ago. Back to you though. You are not currently running at this moment. Is that correct?
That is kind of correct. I actually just got released with a yellow light. I yellow light so that I don't get too excited with a green light.
So talk to me about that. How has that been for the last few weeks and months?
Yeah. So to give background, I mentioned earlier in this podcast that nagging hamstring tendinopathy injury that I struggled through my last 2 years of college, that continued on and off after college. Had about a 12-month stint of healthy running post collegiately that I'm so grateful for. Enabled me to accomplish a lot of goals in a short period of time, despite having missed a ton of training the previous 2 years. But almost exactly 2-ish weeks after the pandemic hit last March, so in early April last year, I remember my last run that I went on where the tendon had obviously been super fragile in my left hamstring, and it just tore away from the bone. And so I, since last April, stopped running, and at the time didn't get an MRI because I thought that, well, I've been dealing with this same injury on and off, I know how to come back from it. But it came to September and I still wasn't better. And given my history of fighting through it, and fighting back and forth through healthy and unhealthy running for several years. I was just tired. And so I sought out alternatives and ended up getting surgery in October. So I am now 4.5 months post-op, and my surgeon and I got a control MRI to look it over, see how the healing process has been. And I've been given the yellow light to start slowly returning to running. I am expected to make a full recovery, but I definitely plan on taking it slow because this is a really cool opportunity for me to rebuild my body and in a sustainable way to last what I hope is a lifetime of running. So, yeah, kind of on the up and up.
Cool. How was it hard to not run? I know we talked at length about running is like the best way to socialize from a COVID safety standpoint versus being indoors with people and whatnot. So it sounded like it has been hard, but talk to me about like the last 6+ months of seeing other people doing what they love and what you love and not being able to do it.
Yeah, so it's definitely been hard. The simple answer is yes. It's still hard. Even though I just got released to run, I w- um my little jogs back are very humbling, and this is the first time I've actually even told anyone other than my doctors in a public setting that I'm back to running, because it's you don't feel like yourself whenever you're starting over. You're like, why is a 9-minute mile so hard? And
Yeah.
that part is not fun. But at this at the same time, it became much easier to not run after the surgery because I had a glimmer of hope. Whenever I got really tired of trying to run but not being pain free during the pandemic. And that combined with the pandemic was probably the hardest stint of this not running, because as we kind of talked about previously, even though there weren't races, for a lot of people, myself included, having running during that time was almost like the one thing that it seemed like we could control in what had become such an uncontrollable and chaotic world. And so it was almost as the external world was in chaos with the coronavirus, my own little internal world seemed to be going on its own chaotic journey as well. And so that was just a perfect little storm going on during the pandemic. So definitely not a fun time mentally or physically. But once you get surgery, it's very clear that you shouldn't be running. And
But what were you doing to cope with it?
I I went on a lot of hikes. So I was able to hike pain free, which I was so incredibly grateful for. And living in Boulder, Colorado, there are plenty of mountains and beautiful hikes right in my backyard. And that is truly what saved me, is being able to still experience the outdoors, because after dealing with an injury for so long, you have to ask yourself the hard questions, like, what if I can't run again ever? How
What was your answer to that?
I decided that I was going to the way that I poured myself into running, I was going to find something else that I was going to do. And it was being outside and connecting with nature was always going to be important to me. So I was very grateful to hike. But I just feel this like artistic need to create. And so I was like, I'm going to apply to Juilliard and become a professional piano player. Or I wonder if if it's too late to become a ballerina, or I'm going to build like the coolest Python program ever. Like, I just knew that as I said earlier, I'm in my soul, I'm like a pursuer of passions. I'm just passionate about anything, about passion. Like, I love hearing people talk about their passions, things that they're devoted their life to, even if it's something I'm totally not interested in. I just want to hear you talk about something passionately. And so it became a thing of, okay, if I can't run, let's find out now so that I can find my next passion and just pour my whole heart into it.
My buddy Tommy is a writer and journalist and new videographer, and he's started this project called What's Your Passion? And they're like 2-minute videos of people talking and sharing their passion. So I'm going to have to share this with you.
Oh my God, I love
He's
that.
Layman's Productions on Instagram. And he's doing it around Boston. And just like he followed me around for a day, and we took video at Heartbreak Hill and like some other iconic spots around Boston, and the river, Charles River, and then I recorded an audio file, and he overlaid that. And it's like, it's so powerful to hear people talking about what they care about. And like, one guy was talking about the piano, and another was talking about CrossFit. Like, it's like these things that I'm not passionate about, like I want to become a professional at them, because the hearing someone talk so passionately is just so motivating. Thanks again to Beam for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. I take their Dream Powder most nights before bed. Dream contains magnesium, a small amount of melatonin, and broad spectrum nano CBD, and always leads to a refreshing night's sleep. I'm also a big fan of their focus capsules for during the day. Containing many of the nutrients that I know my body needs, such as ashwagandha, CoQ10, as well as CBD, Focus helps you do exactly that. Visit beamtlc.com and use the code FTLR for 15% off, and let me know what you think. And now, back to our conversation. Another thing you mentioned was the best Python Curie. Talk to me about the one that we were tweeting about a while back. Where did that first, what was it, and where did that come from?
Yeah, so I think we've had several, but I think the one you're talking about was the sentiment analysis
Yeah.
where it gave you a positive score. Yeah, okay. So I built a Python program, which for anyone who doesn't know, Python is a programming language that's very robust that you build from scratch. So you can do so much with it, whether it's like build different apps or computer programs or analysis, whatever. And I built this program that looked at people's tweets so I could input whoever's usernames I wanted. I inputted my own and Jonathan's because we like talking actively on Twitter. And it gave out it did a sensitive analysis on someone's tweets, which that means it looks at the words that you're tweeting and gives you basically a positivity score. And so I looked at different people and how positive their Twitter was, and would reach out to Jonathan whenever I was like, looks like you had a low day today. How you doing over there? Your positivity score would went down, and he would respond, be like, I'm fantastic, 10 exclamation points.
You are awesome.
Yeah. So it was really nice because we kind of boosted each other in an effort to boost our own sensitive analysis score.
Yeah, I think you put in David Roche in there, and it broke the algorithm. It said cannot compute too positive.
I know. I was like, I want to see how high this sensitive analysis score can go. Input David Roche.
So how did you get into this type of field?
So I said that I'm currently pursuing my master's in data analytics, and as part of the master's program, we got introduced to beginner Python because you can analyze data in Python. There's many ways to analyze data, but this is just one of them. But I really loved, kind of how I alluded to earlier, the creativity that the Python programming language allows, because you don't rely on something that someone else has already built. You have to build it yourself. And so that part was really fun for me, because it was like a little logic puzzle. And the more I practiced it on my own, the more I could see that, oh, there's a bunch of fun stuff that you can do. So I just started taking other classes on my own to complement what we were learning in school, to see what other fun stuff I could program. And that's kind of how I came across the Twitter sentiment analysis that I did, because I think that numbers are fun, creating is fun, and if I can, and asking questions is fun. And so I just wanted to see how many questions I could answer in a Python, and then answer them myself with a Python program.
Very cool. What are you currently working on?
So I am currently learning on, I really like text data. So which is what tweets are, like text. Text data could include text messages or emails or reviews for a product or whatever. The reason I like text data is because I think it is very insightful into a person's mind and the mind frames that we're all in. And the brain is very interesting to me. And so looking at data from a psychoanalysis perspective, I think is very interesting. And so I'm taking a class, which is outside of my program, to learn how to be better analyze text data. And then I actually downloaded all of my text messages from iMessage. And so after I finish the class, I want to analyze text conversations I've had with specific people and see if there's anything insightful about those.
What kind of insights would you be looking for?
So I'm writing down ideas that who knows if I'll be able to answer them. But I think it would be cool to look at, are there certain times during the month or throughout the year that people seem to use certain words more often? So that would be a simple analysis. Like, when do people say the words love the most often? Or if I can do a sentiment analysis, this is very big picture and big idea, but I think it would be cool to predict when a woman is on her menstrual cycle based on like how messy she is in her text messages. And
Okay, you've
so
got $1 million idea there.
I think so too. I just need the data, because obviously just my few I can't run an algorithm on like 10 people's worth of 5 years of data. I need some. So if anyone wants to send me all of their messages or wants to allow me, I'll run this algorithm and see if I can sell it to someone.
Yeah, sell it to like Men's Journal or Ask Men or something like that.
Yeah,
Like
they would
$10 a month app.
That's
Yeah.
such a good idea. Like on a dating app, because the men need to know how to best respond to the woman. Like, okay, I need to be extra sensitive this week, and don't need to acknowledge why, but just having that knowledge can really help relationships.
I think that's fantastic. I'll be signing up. Switching gears to a question that you asked me at about 6:35 in the morning. Hopefully it's okay that I ask you, what are your demons? So switching gears entirely.
Yeah.
That
Good
might be a little
question.
heavy. Might be a little heavy for this, but
No, not too heavy. I forgive me if I don't give the exact same answer, because I don't even remember what I said whenever we had this conversation. But I would say that my biggest demon is I always think that I'm not enough. Every day I'm a very harsh self-critic, and every day I kind of run through my mind the choices that I made, and it always seems like it was either too little or too much, and I'm never accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. I said I'm a dreamer, and sometimes I wonder if my dreams are too big because I always seem very disappointed in myself. And that's not a way to live. And that's definitely a mindset that am I have to actively practice getting out of. But whenever I'm insecure or not in the best mental health space, that's very much my default, and leads to perfectionist tendencies and a lot of self-doubt.
I do remember that. Thank you for sharing that. It was very similar to the answer that you gave a couple weeks ago. What do you do to rectify the self-doubt and feelings of not being enough? It's a conversation that comes up sometimes when talking about imposter syndrome, or I've had the conversation about like you are enough, or David and Megan talk about you are enough as like their whole their whole like mantra and purpose in life is to help people get to a place of self-acceptance and self-love. So how do you work on this?
So the thing that I found to be the most helpful for me are words, whether it's reading or writing. I've kept a journal since I was in the third grade, and taking the time to actually write how I'm feeling really helps. And sometimes that's hard. And so sometimes the journal entry is more just a log of what went on during a day. But then for every one of those, there's a journal entry where I kind of discover something about myself or what I was feeling, just because journaling with pen and paper forces you to slow down versus like journaling on a computer where you can type really fast. And I think that that is an important part of journaling, because your hand can only move so fast before it cramps, and it forces your mind to really focus on what you're writing and absorb. And so that's really helped me, because putting words to my feelings helps me kind of muck through the lies that I tell myself, because that's what fear is, right? Fear's made up. We whenever we're afraid of something, it's usually not based on facts, it's based on anticipations. And whenever I write that down, I can rationalize through these fears and say, okay, so this is the fear that I'm having, but what's the alternative? With this, I think that this might happen, and that sounds scary, but what if this other good thing could happen too? Like, that's just as realistic. And it just kind of puts me in a different mind frame, and and see that the fears aren't rational. They're not based on facts. And for every sad story, there's also a lot of good stories. And so that's where the reading comes into play too, is just hearing other people's stories. You see that there's not one person who isn't dealing with something, and it makes my own problems, I say in air quotes, problems, seem so much smaller, because we're all dealing with our own demons, and no one's demon is better or worse or stronger or weaker than someone else's. They're just different. And if we can all realize how small we are, I think that it makes the world a less scary place.
I love that. I just wrote down fear is made up, and it's all about the anticipation versus anything rational. I'm reading Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, and she spends the first 50 pages of the book writing about vulnerability and anticipation of fear versus like realized fear, and courage, and being vulnerable is not a sign of weakness. And she polled special ops members and military members and blah blah blah, and found in every single scenario where anything good happened, there was always a little bit of vulnerability and unknown, but that's required. And the other piece that she highlighted was like, I'm not interested in opinions or conversations with people who aren't interested in that. Essentially saying, if your life is status quo and all about removing risk and never taking a chance, like, not interested in your opinion. And I think that, so much of our own experience is about who we surround ourselves with. That this is like, look for people who are bold and taking risks, and you'll be a little more comfortable in doing the same thing.
Yes, exactly. And that's something that this pandemic has made so clear is humans are social creatures. We're built for connection, and there is not connection without vulnerability. And so that's why I loved that walk that we did at 6:30 in the morning, because I don't know about you, but I was like, let's talk about, like, I want to get to know Jonathan. I don't want to just hear about the upcoming trip to Breckenridge or whatever, as cool as that sounds, but I want to get to know you. Like, what keeps you up at night? What sets your soul on fire? That connection is what we're made for.
Yeah. Completely agree. How does running fit into that equation for you?
Yeah. Running is the ultimate teacher of life. I love, and that's one of the reasons why, like, this injury that, like, going on and off for 4 years really sucks. There's been a lot of lows, but I've learned so much in the
Yeah.
time that I've been sidelined, about myself and about the human existence in general. And there's just I've never seen another lesson teacher like running, or way to bring people together like running. Because whenever you tell me you're a runner, I say, there's so much loaded in that one sentence. I know how I know you know pain. I know you know perseverance. I know you've thought about giving up every single time and then said no and not given up. And I know that you know what it's like to epically fail, and you know what it's like to pursue something without the promise of that something ever happening. And there's just a connection whenever someone says that they're a runner with other that I don't think there's another community like that. And the cool thing about that is that connection is built whenever we're with people, whenever we're running with people, but it's also built on the solo runs. Whenever I go out by myself with no music or podcasts or anything, no one else is even around, and I'm just exploring my own fears and pain, I feel like at the same time I'm connecting deeper to my own true being while connecting to other people around me. Like, I just become a better version of myself.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. It's like, you can't be a runner without struggling, and you can't be a human without struggling. And the the lessons, like running is a sandbox where you can play around and, for the most part, there's little risk. I mean, sure, you might need surgery or you might need, some time off or whatnot, but in the grand scheme of things, like you can't screw up that much in running. But you can in life. But the lessons that you can learn from the mistakes in running translate into life. And I think that there's so much carryover there. And I think it's a reason that runners and endurance athletes are drawn to challenging things in life. There's an article a few years ago in Outside Magazine that said that endurance athletes make better employees, and it's valid. And the reason it's valid is exactly what you said. Like, to be a good employee, you need to challenge yourself, and you need to set goals, and you need to hit quotas and hit, and do consistently good work in order to get better and get a raise and get a promotion and keep getting paid and all these kinds of things. And who better to understand that process than somebody who does that process every single day?
So true. Agree 100%.
So again, switching gears a little bit, if you could speak to 20-year-old Karis, what would you say?
If I could speak to younger Karis, I would have reminded her, this is your life. To me, this mantra serves as a reminder that I can pursue high goals and have big dreams while simultaneously enjoying today. Because we aren't guaranteed the future. Our life exists in this moment right now, and everything we do is only worth it if we stay present in the now. And so just every day thinking that this is your life right here, this moment.
I love that so much. David has put that in my training log like 6 times in the last year.
Really?
I often get like really excited and excitable about things, whether it's relationships that seem to be interesting and then turn out to be nothing or whatnot, or projects or trips or whatever. And he always like grounds me and brings me back to like all that matters. Well, not all that matters, but the most important thing is in this moment, you are present and you are happy and you are enjoying the present, because you could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And then who cares about all your hopes and dreams and aspirations if you're not living it in the moment? And part of that is like rectifying like reality and the fact that like I can't just play in the mountains for 168 hours a week. That's not reasonable. But for the hours that I can, I'm enjoying it, and that's the quality of life I'm looking for in this moment. And I don't remember where I was going with that, but it's so true.
No, that was so good.
Yeah, it's the we're not guaranteed the future, so may as well enjoy the now.
Yeah, and I think it brings it full circle back to what we started with, in that it has to be a process, enjoyment in the process, where you're not just, it's not just a success if you meet whatever goal. You have to be enjoying every single moment along the way. Not that it all needs to be like rainbows and butterflies. I definitely don't think that um every run needs to be glorious and every day is just such a good day. Like, that's
Well, in
not
Boulder it is.
I don't know. It was 0 degrees last week, and that was not a good day. um but in that grind or those hard days, I think you still find joy. Because also, one thing, thought I really like is like happiness is not the same as joy. And I think that happiness is much more volatile and on a day-to-day thing. on a day-to-day process, but joy is something that is inside a person and that someone can hold on to on their darkest days. And that's what allows us as runners and as humans to push through those doubts and those dark days or dark seasons, whether it's an injury or a pandemic or whatever, is the joy in each moment.
I love that. I think it's a good place to wrap. So thank you so much for sharing all of this and for sharing your passions and some kitty meows as well behind you as Louise was crawling on your head, which was pretty funny. You kept calm under fire there. If people want to follow along with you and your journey and passions, where can they follow you?
Yeah, probably the best place would be on Instagram or Twitter. Both handles are the exact same. It's my first and last name, which is spelled Karisjochen. It's pronounced Karis Jochen. It just does not look that way.
Awesome. Well, Karis, thanks so much for taking some time to chat, and see you again soon in Boulder, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jonathan.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.